So let's look at a diagram. You're probably familiar with this diagram from your ECO101 class. These are the cost curves and revenue curves of a monopolist. And this is the downward sloping demand curve. Remember, the demand curve and the average revenue curve is the same thing. Because this is a downward sloping demand curve, there is a downward sloping marginal revenue curve located below it. Here we have the U-shaped average and marginal cost curves, with the marginal cost curve cutting the average cost curve at its lowest point. The monopoly firm, like any other firm, will apply the profit maximizing rule, which is MR is equal to MC, in order to locate or identify the profit maximizing quantity. So this firm sets MR is equal to MC, find that it occurs over here at an output of Q star. So once Q star has been identified, you then need to find out the price at which Q star can be sold, the monopoly price. To do so, you have to go up to the demand curve, and then you go left, and then you figure out the monopoly price P star. Notice that at Q star, the average cost of production is given by this point A, right, which corresponds to a cost of C. So on every unit sold, the monopolist earns a profit of P star minus C. Since it is selling Q star units, it enjoys profits equivalent to this rectangle, P star E A C, right? So P star minus C times Q star would give you the area of this rectangle, which is P star EAC. Now let's look at an important mathematical result, the inverse elasticity rule. Now we know that total revenue is price times quantity. We can totally differentiate total revenue. So DTR is equal to PDQ plus QDP, making use of the product rule. So dividing both sides of the equation by dq, on the left-hand side, we get dtr by dq, and that is equal to p plus q times dp by dq. But dtr by dq is just marginal revenue. When you differentiate total revenue, you get marginal revenue. So marginal revenue is equal to p plus q times dp by dq. Now recall that the point price elasticity of demand is E, which is delta q by delta p times p by q. In differential form, we may write E is equal to dq by dp, replacing delta q by delta p with dq by dp, multiplied by p by q. And if we rearrange the expression and have dp by dq on the left-hand side, dp by dq is just the reciprocal of dq by dp. So dp by dq is equal to p by q into 1 by e. Now, where else do we have dp by dq? Here we have dp by dq, right? So we're going to replace this dp by dq by p by q into 1 by e. So we have p plus q times p by q into 1 by e. So when you remove the brackets, q and q cancel each other out, and we have p plus p into 1 by e. So when we take p common, we have p into 1 plus 1 by e. Now remember that E is negative. The elasticity of demand is negative because the demand curve is downward sloping. Thus, we have the following relationship between elasticity and marginal revenue. So E is less than -1 would imply that marginal revenue is greater than 0, it's positive, right? So if E is less than 1, right, then MR would be positive. And this would be a case of elastic demand. If E is exactly equal to -1, then if you plug -1 over here, you'll have 1 minus 1, which is 0. So P into 0 is 0. So then your marginal revenue would just be 0. So this would be a case of unit elasticity. And if E is greater than -1, right, then MR would be less than 0. So this is a case of inelastic demand. So this is the inverse elasticity rule. Okay, for E less than -1, MR is positive. For E greater than -1, MR is negative. So now that we understand the inverse elasticity rule, let's look at the price marginal cost markup. So profit maximizing firm always sets MC is equal to MR. Marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. Thus, MC is equal to marginal revenue, but we have just seen that marginal revenue is equal to P times 1 plus 1 by E. So MC is equal to P times 1 plus 1 by E. So if we remove brackets and rearrange the equation, we will get MC by P is equal to 1 plus E by E. And if you take the reciprocal, it implies that P by MC is equal to E by 1 plus E. The ratio P by MC represents the markup of price over marginal cost, expressed as a ratio. So how much more than marginal cost is the price at which you are selling the good, right? So if you express that as a ratio, P by MC, it's called a markup. Now notice that for the right-hand side to remain positive, because P by MC is a positive fraction, for the right-hand side to remain positive, it must be the case that E is less than minus 1. In other words, demand must be elastic. Now we can manipulate MC is equal to P times 1 plus 1 by E in a slightly different way. And we can write MC by P is equal to 1 plus 1 by E. Take 1 to the other side. We have MC by P minus 1. So that is equal to 1 by E. So when we simplify, we get MC minus P by P is equal to 1 by E. Or if we multiply both sides by minus 1, on the left-hand side, we will get P minus MC by P. And on the right-hand side, we get minus 1 by E. The left-hand side is, again, the markup of price over marginal cost. Again, it is expressed as a ratio or percentage of price. And for it to remain a positive fraction, so remember, left-hand side is a fraction, and for it to remain a positive fraction, E again has to be less than minus 1 on the right-hand side, i.e. demand must be elastic. So we come to a very important conclusion. The monopolist never operates in the inelastic region of the demand curve. So if you remember your ECO101, when you have a downward sloping demand curve, in the middle of the demand curve, your elasticity is unitary, it is equal to 1. In the top half of the demand curve, it is elastic, right? And in the bottom half of the demand curve, it is inelastic. A monopolist will always operate in the top half of the demand curve because it wants its marginal revenue to be positive. What is marginal revenue? When you sell an extra unit, what is the incremental revenue? You don't want that to be negative. You always want it to be positive. That is only possible when the elasticity of demand is less than minus 1, or demand is elastic. So the monopolist never operates in the inelastic region of the demand curve. Furthermore, the firm's markup also depends inversely on the elasticity of market demand. The higher the elasticity, the lower the markup, and vice versa. Right, so again, two diagrams. So monopoly profits depend on the relationship between demand and average cost curves. So we've already seen the left-hand side of this diagram a while ago, right? MR is equal to MC is the profit maximizing condition. Q star is your profit maximizing quantity. To figure out the profit maximizing price, we go up to the demand curve, and to the left, that is P star. P star is greater than the corresponding average cost at Q star. So there are abnormal profits of P star minus C star times Q star, which is the area of this rectangle. However, it is also possible for a monopolist not to have any profits or any positive economic profits. When will that happen? That will happen when average cost is tangential to average revenue or demand, right? So again, when you apply the MR is equal to MC rule and identify profit maximizing output, then you go up to the demand curve to figure out profit maximizing price, and that is P star. Notice that at that point, P star is also equal to AC star because demand is tangential to AC at that point. So if P star is equal to AC star, then P star minus C star is just 0. And so there are 0 economic profits, only normal profits. This is characteristic of a certain market structure called monopolistic competition. We will study that in a later chapter. There is no monopoly supply curve. A monopolist is a single firm facing a fixed market demand curve. Unlike in perfectly competitive markets, where the market supply curve could be constructed by horizontally summing the individual firm supply curves, such an exercise is not possible when there is only one firm, and a monopolist is just one firm. The monopolist will only produce where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. That is a single point. That would give you a single quantity produced. So the point is the only supply point. It is not a curve. If the demand curve or average revenue curve shifts, then the marginal revenue curve will shift along with it. And that would yield a different MR equals to MC point each time. You might join the MR equal to MC points, but the resulting curve does not have any economic meaning. And it might have an odd shape, right? So there is no monopoly supply curve because a monopoly only supplies at one point where MR is equal to MC and at no other point. So there is no price supply trade-off as you would have in a normal supply curve.